narrator on your console or magnifier or closed captions. Those are all those like base level assistive technologies that are expected in computers, right? Whether your computer's a phone or Windows or a console. But as we were working on all of this for like those compliance reasons, you know, we recognized that this was the problem, right? That this thing was really blocking people from using the console, because we'd go out and meet people with limited mobility, like our buddy Todd here. And often they tell us like, well, I'm a PC gamer. And you know, we're used to in gaming hearing PC console, like it's like some sort of tribal thing. But what they were really telling us was they couldn't use the controller, right? So they played PC because they couldn't use a game controller. So that's when we started the development of the Xbox Adaptive Controller. We met Kate. This is the day I met Caitlin. This was like, I think this was back in 2016. You know, this rig was made by Warfighter Engage, which is an organization that Caitlin runs. And it is, if you're wondering what he's doing, he's got ABXY under his like right arm. He's got left stick under his other arm. Bumpers and triggers are his legs. And then that blue stock is right stick. He's not using it because he's playing a fighting game. So that's why he's not using it. So this sort of taught us the modularity, you know. So we call the adaptive controller because you don't adapt to it. You don't adapt to it. It's supposed to adapt to you, right? And that's how we think about our adaptive hardware. All that work's kind of started in here. We've gone from controllers to mice and keyboards. We do stuff for the blind with our Actually, where's Jaden? I gotta give Jaden something. I'll remember. Like on that table in front of Brandon is like our Surface Adaptive Kit, which is like for you know, which is something that like tactile affordances for the blind. We recently have also a new type cover, which is large print. One of the things that as an industrial designer, whatever I am today, I wear many hats. You know, we think about stigma a lot. We think about the fact that a lot of assistive technologies is medically stigmatizing. I mean, I'm sure we all wear glasses and don't care, but like, would you be cool like to find out you had to wear a hearing aid all of a sudden, right? Like, you know, and that's a weird cultural thing that I think we need to kind of get over. But that's medical stigma, right? Like people, you know, when they talk about assistive technology abandonment, they talk about somewhere in the range to 50 to 60% of assistive technology is abandoned by the people that like pick it up and use it. And if you take hearing aids out of that equation, it drops to 30. It's crazy. So it's like, it's one of those things like stigma is real. We have to recognize it. We have to design for it. We have to make, you know, I'm very thankful that AirPod Pro 2 are a viable hearing aid. I think it's going to get really interesting when they start to work on that. But that's a quick intro of the lab. Please look around, please take pictures. Yeah, Caitlin.
Can you talk a little bit, Bryce, about the physical aspects of the lab space?
Oh, about the space? Yeah, so we try to be as accessible as possible in here, you know, because we want to, we do, you know, want the community to come in. I've got 2 glass walls and I'm not really echoing a lot because I've got all this crazy like soundproofing in here. You've watched me adjust the colors of the lights. We have our sensory area, you know. Some of you have walked through our double wide doors over there. We actually, if you walk down the hall, sometimes we do this on the tour, but it's kind of weird. We have an adult-sized changing table in one of our bathrooms. Like it's like a motorized adult-sized changing table for people who kind of need that and who have a caregiver. But yeah, that's the aspect of the room. Oh, and the floor pattern. You know, we have these tile and carpet and laminate, and you can see that it's set up in a grid. Actually, Jaden, I should ask you if you actually noticed this. It's meant for people who are blind so that they have a tactile affordance when they're moving from one section of the room to the other. It's a little bit of like, it's supposed to be wayfinding. So yeah, that's the aspect of the room. You know, I felt like we were state of the art like a couple years ago. I'd probably make some changes now. Actually, I'll show you one bug fix, and this is funny, Brandon, this is practically your bug fix. So you look at that back wall, right? And we are purposely stimulating senses in here, but if it's a pillow or if it's like something in the sensory room or a twinkling light, I could turn it off. But folks like Brandon, because Brandon was one of the first people to point this out to us, I can't turn off that wall, right? That wall, if you've got ADHD, can be a little bit tweaky, right? So what we've kind of done with one of the bug fixes, so a fix that wasn't like necessarily for the blind, or wasn't designed, was that we installed blinds. Like I can basically, like, you know, if someone doesn't like it, I can turn off the wall. So that's a good one. It's funny that you're here, man. I always tell that story, but you're good. Brandon.
I love that I can contribute in some small way.
So yeah, so that's the lab, and you know, we're here all the time. You know, if you ever want to look us up and bring your teams by, you know, that's what we're here for. It's totally open. That's something that's possible for anyone to kind of do. You know, we don't have secrets. Nintendo's been in here, Amazon's been in here, Google's been in here. Like, they've all been in here. We don't hide anything from anyone. So, but yeah, I really want to thank you for coming, and I kind of want to turn it over to Brandon for his presentation.
So first off, thanks to Bryce. Bryce and I've known each other forever, long time. And it's, you know, it's funny, we have this term in the accessibility community, we call ourselves accessibility buddies. We've been accessibility buddies for a long time, and it's fantastic to see what Bryce has done with the lab. Also, before I get started, I would like to introduce my manager and our accessibility team lead and our doctor of occupational therapy, Dr. Jones. Caitlin Jones, that will never get old. Caitlin leads our team, and my team does a lot of different things within Xbox around accessibility. I'll try to spare you a lot of it because we don't have a ton of time today, but I just want to take a quick second to tell you a little bit about who I am and a little bit about my journey. So I have been working in Xbox since 2002. But it was in 2003 that I got into accessibility. I had studied sign language interpreting in a past life and found out that I was a terrible interpreter because of my neurodiversity. I can't parallel process very well. So I knew about accessibility. I'd worked on accessibility features in Office, accessibility features in Windows Media Server. I worked on captioning there back in 2001. But when I came to Xbox, it did not occur to me at all that we needed accessibility in products. But at the time I was volunteering at Seattle Children's Hospital, and I was a child life volunteer, and I would just go and hang out with kids. It was a great way to spend a Saturday. I was single at the time, didn't have any, you know, I was kind of newer in the area, didn't know a lot of people, so I'd just go and hang out with these kids, and we'd play board games and card games. Of course, they all thought it was pretty cool that, you know, this guy that works for Xbox was there, and they always had questions for me. They want to play me, like, oh man, let me see if I can beat you at Halo or whatever, and it was great. Well, one day, I had the coordinator come to me and say, you know, we've got this girl, she's up in her room, she's not really in a good place. You know, she has been literally, physically in the hospital for over a year, has not left. And we can't get her to do anything. Like, she doesn't want to do art, she doesn't want to watch videos. We sent up lots of volunteers. Can you see if you can get her, you know, kind of active, you know, engage her in some way? So went upstairs, pulled out all the stuff. Hey, you want to do crafts? You want to do art? You want to do this? Movies? Blah blah blah. And finally, the trump card I pulled out was like I had my business cards in on the back. At the time, we had all the pictures of our characters from our various games. I pulled it out. I'm like, well, you know, I work for Xbox. Maybe we can play some video games. She looked at me so unimpressed and was like, I don't like video games. And I was like, oh really? And stupidly, I said, why? And she looked at me and she said, because you don't make any that I can play. And that was like getting hit with a brick. Like in that moment, it didn't occur to me that this person, because of their disabilities, wouldn't be able to hold one of those controllers because of those assumptions we had made, right? When we developed those controllers. And I felt like such a moron. And so I was like, okay, that was a Saturday. Monday, I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna start seeing, what are we doing here? Like, who's working on this? Went back. At the time I was in Xbox certification, I started asking around, and it turns out that at that time, accessibility was very nascent. Now, there were some people who were doing some great work at the time, like Michelle Hinn, Thomas Weston, doing amazing work, but just literally a handful of people, like 3-4 people, JT Kimball. But I learned from these people, and I started engaging with these people. And like Bryce, I started doing it as a volunteer job. I started figuring out, how can I put accessibility into my day job? I did that all the way through Xbox certification, digital channel management, all the way through my time at 343 as a UI producer on Halo Infinite and Halo 5, as well as a release manager, until finally I was able to make it my full-time job. So I now have my dream job. I love it. And but I tell this story because I think it's important, A, for us to recognize that all of us are in different points of our accessibility journey. Some are just learning about it. Some have been thinking about it for a while. We're also all learning. We're all on a journey. There is no destination. We're all in this together. We're all growing and learning from one another. And so I'm really just grateful today that you all came in. Hopefully I can teach you all a little bit of what I've learned, but also hopefully I can learn. I would love to learn, what have you been finding that's been working well? Where are you having challenges that we can collaborate? That's really one of my most favorite parts of my job. So Caitlin, if you could click the thing, because my mouse stopped working. So why is game accessibility important? Well, I kind of told you that story really quick, but like, it's that feeling of, well, I mean, here's a question. How many of you have ever been excluded from something, right? I mean, like, I didn't get invited to that party, or I didn't make the varsity basketball team, or like my son just didn't make his hockey, he tried out for a hockey team and he didn't make it and he felt so bad, right? Feeling excluded sucks. No one likes it. And it's not just bad for the person being excluded. It can also be bad for the people who want to participate with those individuals but can't. So the example being, I know a lot of parents who have kids. They're super excited because they want to take, oh, my kid's being born. I want to take them fishing. I want to take them hiking. I want to do rock climbing with them. And they're born with a disability. And all of a sudden they're like, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to do this thing with my child that I love doing. We now have a child who's kind of might feel excluded from being able to participate with their family, but they've also got family members who can't participate, and they're feeling that sense of just real, I mean, I don't know the way to say it, sadness that they're not able to participate with their, with their family members and loved ones and friends, and share these experiences with. So when I think about why game accessibility is important, is that we're trying to solve that, right? Like, we are trying to intentionally include people so that we don't unintentionally exclude them, right? We want to make games so that, no matter, what type of physical abilities you have, cognitive abilities, sensory abilities, you're going to be able to play. Next slide, please. So this is, no, you can go there. I just like to bring up this logo, by the way. So you'll see this kind of plastered around on a lot of our materials as you're going through them. This is our gaming accessibility logo. This was developed by someone in the community. And the reason I put this up there is because one of the most important things about accessibility that, if I could stress one thing today about accessibility, is that there's this concept in accessibility, it's nothing about us without us, right? A lot of assistive technologies have been built for the disability community. People have built games for disabled people. They've built hardware for disabled people. But the Xbox Adaptive Controller, again, I've worked at Microsoft since '98. The Xbox Adaptive Controller was the first piece of hardware I truly felt like Microsoft built with the disability community. From day one, Caitlin and the organization she's a part of, Warfighter Engage, they were a part of that project, like literally day one. And that's why that project evolved. And if we had more time, Bryce can tell great stories about how that thing evolved over time and all the different design changes that went into it and whatnot. But that's why it became such an powerful and impactful device, is because we developed with the community. And so this logo was designed in the community. It was someone from our disability community who came up with this logo. And I just love it, because it really, I think, it's easy to understand. It tells you immediately, like, you know what we're talking about when you see that logo. And so I use it just as a reminder that bringing in the community has great ideas. The community wants to be developers, they want to be designers, they want to be testers, they want to be research participants. Make sure that no matter what you're doing in your game development, you're bringing in the community. And that's really one of the reasons why we built this lab, right? So that we could bring in the community and meet them where they are and ask them, like, how can we collaborate on these products? Not just don't tell us what you want. Let's collaborate. Like, let's truly have a dialogue and build great things. And that's how we got some of these amazingly cool products, like the Adaptive Controller.
think one thing just to add that's cool too is you'll actually see this logo be used across the entire industry. So it's not Xbox's logo, it's the accessibility and disability community's logo. So you'll see Sony use it, you'll see Google, you'll see, you know, any gaming company across the industry, and anyone who wants to is welcome to use that to signify that they are prioritizing accessibility, or that a resource or a device or whatever it is supports accessibility initiatives.
Caleb, it's a really fantastic point. In fact, the buttons that we have back there, and I hope you will take one or two, the pins. The reason we didn't put Xbox branding on that, the reason we didn't put our logo on that or do it in Xbox green, was because when we think about accessibility, we truly don't think of it as competition. We think of it as collaboration. Now, don't get me wrong. Do I love it when like Nintendo or Sony come out with a cool accessibility feature on their console, and I can go to my leadership and be like, hey, well, Sony did it. Can we do it? Like, that's awesome. That makes my job a little easier. But it's not about competition, right? In fact, Phil Spencer has said, we're not here to compete. We're here to collaborate. And that's why we've had Sony, Nintendo, competitors come into these spaces, and we've shared and we've collaborated. And I'll talk about an initiative in a second. That's a really great example of that. But yeah, like, to your point, like, we really here, whether you're a competitor, a partner, a developer, a consumer, we just want to talk. We want to share our learnings, and we want to learn from you. So we've done a lot of cool stuff, in my opinion, over the years. I mean, examples. I mean, this one's just great, right? Forza Horizon 5, we put sign language interpreters in the game, right? Because for a lot of people who don't maybe know sign language grammar is not the same structure as English. ASL isn't, at least. Also, signs are not exact translations for words. There are some signs that there are no verbal translations for, English translations, and there's English words that we don't have signs for. And so for someone who's grown up deaf in the deaf culture, and ASL is like their first language, reading captions can actually be difficult because they're having to translate in their head English wording into that ASL structure in the way that they think. And so putting in these ASL interpreters, and by the way, we also put in BSL, so we have British Sign Language and ASL, which is American Sign Language, which is awesome. It was just such a cool thing to see how impactful that was for our deaf gamers, or deaf players. And again, this was built with the community, and it was just such a cool thing to see. And as somebody who studied sign language interpreting, I thought it was super, I particularly enjoyed it. It also was really great because I learned a lot of new signs about racing that I didn't know about. We also have created games like Gears 5. Gears 5 is probably our first what I would say, first really good job at making an accessible game, I'd say. We've done a lot since, Motorsport, Forza Motorsport, then we have our blind driving assist in that game. Tell Me Why is a great example of a game that can be played for someone who's low or no vision. Rare has been doing stuff. Every single CU they put out, they do something, even if it's just something small, they try to improve the accessibility, so much so that they've won an award for that. And yeah, so I don't just say this to brag, but I say this because we have been learning. Every time we release a title, we learn from one another, we learn from what our other studios have done, and we try to grow and expand upon that and apply those learnings to our games. And we've really had great results. Next slide. So, I've been in the game accessibility team, I guess, since 2018. And a few of the things that I kicked off that you might have heard of, we have our Xbox accessibility guidelines. There's some other initiatives as well, but we'll start with that one first. Xbox accessibility guidelines, these are something we constantly, about the time we were starting to release these accessible games, we were getting these questions from developers like, well, how can we do that? Like, how can we do what you're doing? And, we felt like there was a need for this. And there were already, just to be clear, there were some guidelines out there. There were the game accessibility guidelines and whatnot. But we felt like we could take a lot of learnings we had put together and kind of put a unique spin on them and make them more readily available and easily understandable for the average game dev. And so we put together these guidelines. These have been revised many, many times. I did the first version, but Caitlin did the second version. It's a lot of work, but these are basically just sets of suggestions that are grouped into different categories. We have some around input, we have some around photosensitivity, we have some around audio accessibility. But it basically goes through and it'll tell you, like, here's kind of why this is important. Here's some things you could think about implementing. Here's some examples of some games that have done it and some screenshots and some videos and pictures and whatnot. And here's some extra resources that if you want to go do this, that you can learn from, whether they're Microsoft resources or third-party resources. What I would say is this is probably the crux. This is like the cornerstone of our accessibility program. Everything we kind of do pretty much ties back to the Xbox Accessibility Guidelines. So if you want to figure out ways to make your games more accessible, a great place to start is looking at the Xbox Accessibility Guidelines. I'd also say that if you see something in the guidelines where you're like, that doesn't feel right, or, oh wow, I have an idea for something you missed, please send those to us. We're constantly trying to update and add to those because, again, accessibility is a journey, not a destination. I just, some people often ask me, God, there's like 23 different ZAG groupings, Xbox Accessibility Guideline groupings. I don't even know where to start. So I've got these 9 that I feel like are good places to start. ZAG 101 is all about text display. That's font size. Great thing to think about if you want to think about developing accessibility early into your product. That is the number one. There's a reason it's number one. It's because text size and fonts and whatnot, if you don't think about it early in your game development, it's going to be a nightmare to implement later. We found this out with Halo. Halo 5, I came to the team and I was like, let's do resizable fonts. And I just got laughed at because we were using all this legacy tech. And to try to rebuild that to make scalable fonts, it was going to be terrible. Halo Infinite, we kind of started from scratch. We had a new engine we were working with, and we were able to go through and add that functionality. So text display is a really great one to start with. Contrast, a really basic one, but a really valuable one, just making sure that people with low vision are able to distinguish different items on the screen. Visual cues talks a lot about things like color blindness. It also talks about things like making sure that you're not using visual indicators alone to convey information. We always want to do multimodal communication of information to players. So if you're communicating something with visuals, you should also be communicating with either audio or haptics. Subtitles and captions, probably pretty straightforward. Audio accessibility, again, this would be things like spatial surround sound and that sort of thing. Putting, doing audio displays, graphical displays of audio on screen. Input, making sure that we're, again, kind of removing some of those button mashing or button holding mechanics. Game difficulty, making sure that you're giving people a lot of different ways to play, whether you want to play hardcore or whether you just basically want to just experience the story, giving people ways to change settings to make the game as enjoyable for them as possible. Photosensitivity, super important. I always talk about this one because this is the only real one that can actually physically harm someone, right? I don't know if y'all know the story about Cyberpunk, but I had done an interview with Leona Rupert about photosensitivity, and then a week later she did a review of Cyberpunk and had a grand mal seizure while playing it because the brain dance sequence, the lights that were flashing caused her to trigger her photosensitive epilepsy. So this is really, really important just for the safety of your players. And then finally, this one's just easy too because it's not, this is just about telling people about all the great work you did. Like, make sure if you're going to put in great accessibility features, make sure people know about it, and make sure they know about it before you launch, right? So that on day one, people with disabilities can go, hey, I know this game has the features, I need to play it, right? It'll be great for your sales, it'll be great for the community, and it's really simple to do. So you want to start with our Xbox Accessibility Guidelines. Those are the first 9 I would start, the groupings I would start with. In the interest of time, I'm going to skip these. I put all these together, but you all can read the ZAGs. They're all on an accessible website. We'll skip through all those, but suffice it to say there's some really good stuff in there, I think, and I'm hoping you'll find it useful. We also have some additional resources we created that hopefully you'll find useful as well.
Hey Brendan, can I add something?
Of course.
Quickly? I just wanted to say, it's really easy for us to stand up here. We own AAA major studios and say, do all of these things that are in the Xbox Accessibility Guidelines, right? There's a lot in there. There's a lot of guidelines and suggestions that we have in there. Try to not let it intimidate you. Even if you're only picking a single thing out of the hundreds of things in there and trying to commit to it and make it better for the disability community, that's a win. If you're not sure where to start or the best place to start, speak to the community, reach out to folks with disabilities, have them try the games that you're creating and get that feedback in real time. That's always going to be your best way to truly understand whether or not what you're building is accessible. So the ZAGs are great, but there's also additional routes that you can try to leverage to help focus like how you prioritize or sift through all of those best practices.
Absolutely. The ZAGs do not replace talking to the disability community. That's really, really important. The other thing I'll say too is like we don't have a single game that meets all of the ZAGs. We have some ZAGs that are in there that none of our games have ever met. The reason for that is that they're aspirational. We didn't want to like set up low bar, like this is the bar we're all going to hit and we're just stay there, right? We want an aspiration. We want a North Star to work towards. So you will find that you'll see stuff in there and you'll be like, oh, I don't know any Microsoft games that do that. Yeah, that's because that's something we want to get to. That's something we want to do. It's going to take some time though, right? And so that's why, they're as robust as they are, but to Caitlin's point, they can also be a little intimidating when you just see like how many things there are in there. Speaking of Caitlin, Caitlin put together this incredible program. It's called the Gaming Accessibility Fundamentals Learning Path. We have had a problem with training in our industry. People come up to me and they go, how do I get your job? How do I learn what you learned? And really, the way I learned was just trial and error, talking to the community for 2 decades. It's not the easiest thing to replicate. We needed ways to get people sped up on accessibility much quicker than that, right? And so Caitlin put together this training. It's almost 4 hours of training. It has all these different modules that talk about accessibility from different angles and different standpoints. It talks about hardware accessibility, software accessibility. It's a great program if you are very new to accessibility or you've got people on your team who are new to accessibility and you want to get them up to speed quickly and give them those foundational components of accessibility. So highly recommend. I've got the AKA.MS's here. It's Game A11Y course, but I'll give you another link at the end that'll be easy to remember where you can get to all of these resources. The next one, another one that Caitlin put together, the Gaming and Disability Player Experience Guide. What I love about this is that this takes the opposite approach to the Xbox accessibility guidelines. Rather than approach it from a game-centric standpoint, this approaches things from a disabilities perspective. It talks about different types of disabilities, how they impact people, how it impacts their interactions with different technologies, gaming and whatnot. And it's a great way to try to build empathy and understanding for how people with different types of disabilities work and play within our different ecosystems, right? It's fantastic. There's tons of really great art and examples. It's just a great resource. I would say this is like once you've done the gaming, you've done the fundamentals, this is like the next level, like this is the 201 course, right? So highly recommend you check out the Player Experience Guide. It's a great document. We also just have a link to like tons and tons of accessibility resources. There's so much out there now, and it's fantastic. I can't tell you enough. I can't say how cool it is that there's now so many resources available. So we just tried to collate them all, and you can go check them out at this link here, and we're constantly trying to add to those. Our next one are accessibility feature tags. Now this is kind of late breaking, and I'll give you all kind of a little inside scoop. Some of you might have heard of a new initiative called the Accessible Games Initiative. The Accessible Games Initiative that is being kicked off by the ESA. That is a project where we've gotten different developers from the community to come together to agree on a standard set of taxonomy around how we talk about accessibility features in games, right? The one I like to give the example of, and I was just telling someone earlier, when I was working on Wasteland, we were telling people, oh, we've got subtitles in the game. Subtitles, they're fantastic. You load up the game, there's white subtitles at the bottom, and then you got to the snow level. And all of a sudden, the subtitles weren't really doing much because you couldn't read them in the snow. And so it felt like, well, if we're going to say that our game has subtitles, they should probably meet a certain quality bar, right? We should probably make sure that it's not white on white text, right? We should probably make sure it's not size 6 font, right? It needs to be a little bigger. And so we had started thinking about how we could do this. At first, Xbox, we did our own, right? We created our own system. Again, a lot of feedback from the community. But then we figured, hey, why don't we bring in other developers? Nintendo, Sony, EA, Ubisoft, Google. Actually, Google launched their tags for their games first. They, we worked with them to kick off this initiative. And so, what you'll be seeing here in the coming weeks is some really interesting information about how Microsoft plans on adopting the new accessible games initiative tags. And I'm sorry, that's a mouthful, so I'm still getting used to saying it. But essentially what it is, there's going to be about, I think we have some of our own tags that we're going to keep from our original tags. They have some of then we have their new tags. It's basically about 30 tags we end up with that people are going to be able to go in and say, I meet these criteria, I want to have my game flagged with these features. Then what we do is we validate. So the criteria is listed on our website. It's very clear, like you have to do this to meet this, to get this tag. If you don't meet the tag, we'll politely request that you remove the tag from your product until you're able to either, fix it, or if you decide not to do it, that's fine too. But we do validate these to make sure that there's a level of quality across the experiences. And then what's great about it is that gamers can search in our stores for your games based off of these tags. They can say, I want to see games that have narrated game menus and full keyboard support. And it's a great way to get the hard work you're putting into accessibility to help kind of put some extra eyes on your product. We also have an accessibility spotlight in the Microsoft Store where games that have these tags show up, they get a little extra love. So again, if you're looking for a great way to kind of broaden awareness around your title, accessibility tags are great, and we're super excited to be sort of supporting the Accessible Games Initiative tags. This is that example I was telling you about where we have, we kind of show off games that have these tags. So it's a great way, again, just to get some extra eyes on your product. And you can see here, we've got drop downs where you can scroll in, you can even dive in further and get more information on the tags and whatnot. But just a great way, I think, especially for smaller devs, to get some extra love for their titles. Microsoft Gaming Accessibility Testing Service, I'll talk about this really quick. It's a service that we started because people were asking us if we would test their titles for accessibility, which was really awesome, but at the time we didn't have a way to do that. This service is a way for people to test games or have their games tested by people with disabilities. We hire people with disabilities to test titles. And then we provide reports giving you feedback based off of the Xbox accessibility guidelines. So we'll go and we'll say here, these are some of the issues we found, these are the guidelines they're kind of tagged to, and here are ways you can fix them. This is also the service that tests for the tags. So when you submit a game, this is the team that's going to go in and check to make sure you meet those criteria for those tags. So it's a great program. And that's all I'm going to talk about for now. There's actually a ton more. I've already gone long, I think, and I apologize for that. But the one URL I encourage you to remember is aka.ms/XGA, Xbox Gaming Accessibility, XGA. That will take you to every single one of our resources. You can also send questions to us directly. We have an alias, xaccess@microsoft.com. Anybody can email us, whether you're a developer, whether you're a customer. We're always happy to help. And then if you just want to learn kind of more of the consumer information we have available for Xbox, we have xbox.com/accessibility. So I want to give people time to go around and explore the lab and talk and mingle. Caitlin is here, Bryce is here, I'm here. We want to answer questions. We'd love to hear your stories, your learnings. But just, again, so grateful that you are all here. As someone who remembers the days where you could barely get one or two people to come in and listen to you talk about accessibility, to now have a group as big as this coming in and wanting to learn more. It's really just, it's amazing to see how far we've come as an industry, and it's thanks to people like you who are interested and passionate about it. So thanks again, and enjoy the lab.
Thank you.
Do you want to do Q&A so the stream is easier, more structured, or?
Yeah, I mean, if people have questions right now, feel free. We can do a quick Q&A. I just felt bad talking for so long. I didn't want to.
No,
but yeah,
I have a question from online that I already showed Caitlin.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. Do you want to?
Yeah.
You want to take that one, Caitlin? Then.
So the question is, I feel like one thing I would love to see change is the controllers. I've always struggled to hit the L3 or R3 button since I don't have the strength to push it down as swiftly as others.
Yes. So That is certainly a common pain point that we hear a lot about. I personally also don't like pressing the L3 and R3 just because it's very strenuous on your thumbs. There are a couple of different options depending on the controller that you're using for something like that. So we have pretty robust remapping in the Xbox Accessories app, where if there were other buttons on the controller that you weren't leveraging for a game, you could feasibly remap those two stick presses. Those are the stick press L3, R3.
Yeah.
That's silly language. But yeah, you can remap those to other buttons on the controller that are easier, more accessible for you to hit. Obviously, we have other supports, like Bryce mentioned earlier, the Xbox Adaptive Controller, if that's something that might be of interest to you. We realize not everybody needs a full-on adaptive setup, but Bryce didn't get a ton of time to talk about it, but actually when they were developing this controller, the standard controller fits very nicely on those two large buttons there, and we have a lot of folks who actually remap these two buttons to those two stick presses. This way when they're playing, they could easily hit the L3 and R3 that way and not have to do those downward stick presses. So there's a few different options, but at the same time, we realize that forcing people to buy an entirely separate controller is also not the ideal solution for something like that sort of problem. So remapping, but also feedback noted. We're always welcome to that kind of feedback where we could do better, especially on the actuation force for those stick presses, and it's something that I will bring back to our Xbox hardware teams for sure.
And actually, Caitlin, maybe something you could explain, because a lot of people don't realize. Can you explain Xbox Controller Assist really quick?
Yes, sorry, that's a good point. In order to use that kind of they're mapped to this, but you're using the controller, we have a feature. It used to be called Xbox Copilot. There's another thing called Copilot now, so we kind of had to rename it. It's now called Xbox Controller Assist, but what it essentially does is it takes two physical controllers, and through software, the game or the console only sees them as one controller's worth of input. So, if I press A on this controller, my character jumps. If I press A on this controller, the same character jumps. It's really merging two different physical controllers to control one character, which is great. You can controller, I liked when it was called Copilot, because I can say you can co-pilot with yourself, which is a scenario that people don't often think about. They're kind of thinking about it as two separate people, but a lot of people do it is, how can I maybe put this by my feet, but use this if I have one hand up here. But you
Brad and Dan video if you want.
Oh yeah, you should show that. You need that. Yep. And then Bryce is going to show you a video of how two people separately can co-pilot with each other to support their gameplay. Oh, there's no stand.
We're going to be playing some Fortnite for you guys today, using Brad's Xbox Adaptive Controller. And we'll be using an accessibility feature that Microsoft has called Copilot, which essentially allows two controllers to merge together and act as one. Let's open this up. Okay, start hitting. There he is, shoot him.
So Dan is controlling most aspects of the character. Brad is obviously shooting with his two head right buttons, and they're playing together.
Okay, now get ready to shoot. Shoot. Hold out, hold it down. Come on. Yes, we got it. Oh yeah.
And I love the dancing at the end because, to everybody's points previously, gaming is culture. We play games because it's an art form. It's something that drives community and brings us together. And, those Fortnite, I'm not a cool kid, but I think that was a Fortnite dance thing at one point. But it's without accessibility and intentional inclusion to make sure that players like Brad aren't excluded and have an option to play through those head array buttons, they're excluded from that aspect of culture that we all love and enjoy, and that's why it's important that we prioritize accessibility.
Also call out Copilot's a great example of build for one, expand for many, right? So the great news is that when you build accessibility features, people are going to use them beyond just the disability community. Great example. So I have two children, a 14-year-old and a 10-year-old. My 14-year-old, when he was 3, both of them, interestingly enough, their first game was Forza Horizon. My oldest, when we played, he was 3. He would sit on my lap, and I would wrap my arms around him because he's 3. He couldn't steer. He couldn't keep the car on the road. So I would do the steering, like holding the sticks like this, and then he would pull the triggers, try to pull the triggers to do the gas and the brake, and we would run into cars, because that's what he thought the game was about. We were supposed to hit cars. A lot of fun. Arms got tired very quick, couldn't play with them very long. Fast forward to my youngest son, the Xbox Adaptive Controller came out. Now I could hand him the Xbox Adaptive Controller, and he could do gas and brake on the big pads, and I could steer on another controller. I could play a lot longer. We had a lot more fun. It made for a really cool couch co-op experience. In fact, we've even seen with Halo, we saw people who were doing trying to play through the whole game with two people, like one person's doing the movement, one person's doing the shooting and the grenades, right? So that's an example of building a feature that has some extra value for the community. But you can think about it, subtitles is another great one. How many people have ever played games with subtitles but haven't really needed them from a hearing perspective? I think a lot of us, right? I don't know, what word is that? I don't understand, especially sci-fi games, because I never know exactly what they're saying. What was that word they said? Great way to do that. Or if the kids are just being noisy in the background, it's another great thing, right? So Xbox Controller Assist, I think, is a great example of an accessibility feature that is built for one, expand to many. And similarly, I think as you all are putting accessibility features in your game, you're going to find that a lot of your users who are using them don't have any real disability per se, but they're doing it because it's a preference. It lets them play the way they want to play.
Another secret that I'll let everybody in on is we're all gonna get older. It's an inevitable fact of life, and as humans age, our eyesight isn't as good, our dexterity, our speed, our motion, all of those things are not the same that they were if you don't have a disability when you first started gaming. So by thinking about accessibility now and starting to bake it into what you're creating, you're basically just future-proofing your games for yourself. My grandma loves to play Candy Crush. I kind of want her to play Skyrim or something with me, but we'll get there. But how cool would it be to make sure that the games that I want to play are also accessible for people like her to play and that sort of thing. So investing in accessibility now is making sure your 80-year-old self can keep playing games as well. I know I want to keep playing when I'm 80.
I want to hit 80.
At this point, yeah.
I'm not sure that's going to happen, but we'll see.
For sure.
Other questions?
Yeah. So let's say you knew someone with a type of disability. How would you open a conversation with them to say, I want to build a feature for you to use my game? What kind of questions would you want to ask them?
Yeah, well, actually, I'll use myself as an example. So I have invisible disabilities. There's too many to list, but I'm neurodiverse, let's just put it that way. And I also have chronic pain and some other conditions, some asymmetrical hearing loss. Again, the joys of getting older. So what I would say is the way I would want to be approached would be, hey, we're creating a game. Try it out. Tell me, are you having any challenges with it? Are there any challenges generally you run into with this type of genre of game? Right? Maybe you don't have a build ready to play. Well, find other games that are similar. Oh, I'm doing a Red Dead Redemption type of game. Well, have you played RDR? What challenges did you have there? What are typical challenges you face just in general with gaming? Are you using assistive technology, right? And really just asking a lot of questions, being very sincere, taking a lot of time to listen. And I think really just valuing the time that people are spending with you. This is one thing that we had to learn the hard way at Xbox, was that in the beginning we were like, hey, we just want to bring in all the disabled people and we're just going to talk to them. They're going to give us all this information and then we're just going to say thanks and we're going to get it. That's not cool. These people's time, their time's valuable. Their experience and lived experiences are really valuable, and they make our games so much better. So find ways to make sure that you show an appreciation for that. Compensation, swag, putting names in credits, right? Those are all great ways to just not only, ensure that, those people feel, appreciated and valued, but it's also going to build a better reputation with the community. So when you develop your next game, it's going to be even easier to bring in people, to get more feedback, to get better feedback, right? Just make sure you're showing that appreciation when you're bringing in these people. But again, approach with honesty, humbleness, a desire to learn, and don't be afraid of making mistakes. That's probably the biggest accessibility killer I've run into is people. I literally had a team I worked with not a Microsoft team, a third party team I was working with, who told me that they wanted to do accessibility and they wanted to talk to the community, but they were afraid that they would offend somebody because they had never worked with somebody. And I get questions. I get questions all the time. People ask me, like, how do you shake hands with somebody who's missing their right hand? Is it okay to use the word see around someone who is blind? When is it okay to pet a service dog? Like, really basic questions, but these types of questions actually build fear in people if they aren't answered, and then there's an unconscious kind of desire to kind of shy away from engaging the community when you have those unresolved questions, that unresolved, that fear. So one thing we didn't allude to, but it's up on our resources, we have a gaming and disability etiquette guide. I'd highly recommend if you're gonna reach out to the disability community before you do it, give it a watch, right? It'll just give you some basic tips and tricks. It answers some of those questions that people might be a little embarrassed to ask, like they might be afraid of asking. But again, I'd also say don't be afraid to just ask the community yourself. As long as you come at it from a place of a true desire to learn and a humbleness, and the community wants to they want you to feel comfortable engaging them because they want to be engaged, right? So. Don't let any fear of offending people scare you away. I've seen that happen more than once, and it's really a shame,
And if you're not sure, just ask.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people would rather, instead of you making assumptions on how to approach somebody or how to refer, just across the board, it's totally fine to say like, hey, how would you prefer I do this or that kind of thing, instead of making those assumptions. So just ask.
Also bringing in people, if you're going to bring people into a physical space, just a quick aside, like that's why we built an accessible space here. Try to make sure that if you're bringing in people who are going to be in wheelchairs or people who are low or no vision, whatever, make sure that your space is accessible to them. And we actually have a guide on our site of that same link, XGA. It's called the Playbook for Accessible Gaming Events. It's primarily designed for industry events, but you can also use it for user research labs and user research spaces. And it'll talk about things like making sure your doors are wide enough, because by the way, one thing we've learned is that just because something is compliant doesn't mean it's accessible. So you may be ADA compliant. In fact, Bryce has, I'm sure, a great story about our $20,000 doors at the original lab that we had to replace because we were compliant.
Well, and I think to Katie's point about do what you can. Actually, so welcoming, right? More than ADA compliant. Those doors are ADA compliant. We didn't do that there because I would have had to have re-permitted the building with the city of Redmond, and that would have been $500,000. So ADA is good enough, right? So that's that example.
Yeah. Well, and the point being too that in our original space, we only had one set of doors, and they were ADA compliant. And then the first time we brought someone through with a power chair and a service dog, we were like, oh crap.
That's funny, I forgot about that.
Yeah, that was, and that's one of that's one of the best learnings I took away from it. So just reminding people that, like, if you're bringing in the community, make sure that the physical space is accessible as well. And that's why I love what they've done here, is because it's just so easy to bring in the community, and people feel so welcome and warm. As someone with sensory processing disorder, Bryce joked about this, but the reason he was telling me it, is there a pillow over there, a shiny pillow?
Yeah.
Yeah, so to see that pillow, that's the bane of my existence. We had Nintendo in the lab, and I was trying to talk to Nintendo, and that was sitting on the couch in front of me as I was talking, and it was like squirrel, 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 squirrel. Got totally lost and convoluted. Certain patterns and textures and things really throw me for a loop. So this pattern is really distracting when I'm facing it. And so for someone with sensory processing disorder, putting in these shades or being able to just put pillows away, little things can go a long way towards making people feel comfortable.
I have a question off of that actually. So I understand you have these amazing site that has all of the gaming things, but it sounds like you've put a lot of space into the gaming facility as well. Do you also have documentation on that?
Yeah, so that Playbook for Accessible Gaming Events does cover some of it. That being said, it does not cover everything. And Bryce, I don't know, has your team done any documentation?
We've never written up, but there is actually a Microsoft-wide one, which is way more corporate. Okay. There's like a Microsoft-wide facilities thing. It's a couple years old. But if you look around the campus, it'll basically go, I wonder if they'll, actually, never mind, I know they won't do a new one, because I know who did it. And so, yeah, there is one that is published that's a few years old, but it is very corporate. So I think probably between the, I mean, the other thing is too, there's this wonderful consultant named, I think her name's Karen Braithwaite. She's a local disability consultant, and she's awesome. We use her for all of our stuff around here.
But yeah, I think to Bryce's point, if you use those two resources, you're gonna probably get most of this. But again, we're constantly learning things every day, and so we don't my ask would be, if you learn something cool, please share it with us. Also, by the way, for our Xbox accessibility guidelines, if you guys do a game that does a great job, we came up with this really cool accessibility feature, please let us know. If we can, we'll try to get it as an example. We'll give you credit. We'll make sure you're attributed properly. But we love to show off other people's great accessibility work. So whether it's the space or whether it's a game, please send us that. We'd love to showcase your work. Yeah.
How are you doing outreach to the disability communities?
That's a really interesting question. The reason I say that is because outreach, I think, is Xbox. One of the things I think we've done a pretty good job. And the reason I say that is because we've been fortunate that we've had a team of people with a wide variety of lived experiences. We have people on my team with different disabilities. We have people with different lived experiences. And that gives us a kind of a unique perspective in terms of how to reach out to the community. Because we know how we would like to be reached out to, right? We don't want to be patronized. We don't want offensive sympathy. We want empathy, right? We aren't looking for easy mode. We're not looking for people to kowtow to us, right? We want people to talk to us authentically. We don't want corporate speak. Just tell us, if you screwed up, tell us you screwed up. Tell us you're going to learn from it. Do it better next time, right? We want that authenticity. And so I would say that, we have created a very natural communication style, I think, with the community, right? Whether it's on Twitter, whether it's at events like GA Conf, whether it's or the work we do at Seattle Children's Hospital or Harvard View Spinal Cord Injury Program, or it's Craig Hospital. It's about going out there, being genuine, being authentic, and again, meeting these people, these gamers with disabilities where they are, and just having very natural, very non-corporate, very open conversations. We try to be very humble. We try to tell people where we screw up. We try to tell people where we're growing, where we have room to improve, and we try to make sure that if people have questions or feedback, I hate it when someone tells me, "Oh, I passed on your feedback." Hate that. One of the things I think I'm really proud of is when I get feedback from the community, I will tell that person, look, I can't promise you we're going to change based off your feedback. You tell me you have an issue in this game, I can't go to this studio and say you have to. I don't have that capability. I will pass on your information actually, but I will try to be a little more detailed about it. I try to be look, this is the thing. I talked to a UI producer over there. I explained the situation. I let them know that you've had this issue. If they are interested, would you mind if I connected you with them? If they wanted to learn more about your feedback. But again, just trying to create a very just create trust with the community, right? And by being open, honest, and making sure they don't feel like they're being pushed off to the side or being kind of placated, right? And I think that's why I would say I think we have a pretty good relationship with the community. Always can improve, but I do think we're doing okay. Yeah.
Are there well-known online communities that we could reach out to attempt to find people with those lived experiences?
Yeah, I think the first one I would just say is #A11Y. So for those of you who don't know, accessibility, we have a numeronym for it. There's 11 letters in the word accessibility, and they also look like L's if you put them together, so A11Y. If you just go up and you start tagging your game, when you're tweeting about your games and you're looking for people, just tag your game with A11Y. It's amazing how many people you can get to reach out to you. We also have a program at Microsoft. If you're shipping on our platforms, we have something called the Xbox Accessibility Insiders League. It's over 100,000 individuals who identify as either being disabled or being passionate about accessibility or an ally. We can do surveys with them. We can push builds of your game to them early, pre-release. We can do all sorts of really cool stuff with it. This is a great way to bring people in. And that link I gave you has information on that as well. The other thing is like go out, you can find online communities, and I guess the best thing I would just say is just search, because there's so many of them. Like I couldn't name them all. But also, there's local resources too. Like one of my favorite things to do is to go out to Seattle Children's, right? It's great, and the kids love it too, right? You bring the kids in, you're talking to the kids, they think it's cool. I'm talking to a game developer, I'm helping them make a game. Don't be afraid to go online, bring in feedback, but also don't be afraid to look around locally wherever you're based out of and see if there's like some resources around that you could go and go meet people face to face and get that experience. I'll tell you, if you have to sell accessibility up the chain, like if you have maybe a slightly bigger studio and you need to get a leader to buy off, numbers I have found don't work. It's empathy building, and empathy is best built when you meet someone face to face, when you put a face to the name and you understand why this feature is important. This feature is the difference between this individual being able to play or not, right? So I would say go meet them there as well. But again, if there's a specific community you're looking for, you can email us at X-Access, and we'll try to help you find the right community and make connections.
You can also, sorry.
No, please do.
I'll stand up here.
Yeah,
so
please. Whiplash.
Someone wanted to know the name of the community you mentioned, or how to spell it.
Oh, the Xbox Accessibility Insiders League, was that the one? We use the acronym, we love our acronyms. XAIL, X-A-I-L. If you go up to that link, ak.ms/XGA, I can talk. You will find a link with information on that program, and we can connect you with that community through that program, and happy to do that. But if it's a different community, if it was something else, please let me know, and I'm happy to say it. Sorry.
You can also leverage local disability groups as well, like the local chapter of the American Federation for the Blind, or like those kinds of things. And I'm sure Bryce has like a ton of insight. I don't even know. He's doing this other stuff. Yeah, I'm just kidding. But yeah, like there's a ton of disability groups as well, local hospitals, local organizations, that kind of thing that you could certainly reach out to. There's no harm in asking.
Yeah, there's lots of events. I mean, I don't know if you're looking, there's also agencies if you have the funding. We use Fable a lot. They're out of Toronto. They're decent. They've got a decent sort of stable of people. But yeah, it is better to do what these guys are saying and participate. I personally prefer local, to be honest, because I think the online communities, I mean, you've gotten feedback from folks remotely. Like, this sucks isn't really actionable. Right? Yeah. So it's good to have people you can talk to.
For sure.
Are there any EEG devices being developed for gameplay at all?
I can think of one. I am an Uber nerd. I have a dream that someday I will be able to plug my brain into my Xbox console. We're not working on that. Anybody I don't want Phil emailing me, what did you say? But I did do a project a few years ago as just kind of a fun hackathon project. Do y'all remember this game? It was out briefly. It was called Star Wars Jedi Force Trainer. And what it was you bought this headset that you put on, and you had this little Pepper's Ghost pyramid that you set your iPad in. And basically what you would do is it would have like some like Jedi thing going on, and you would concentrate, and it read your alpha wave state. And the harder you concentrated, the more you could get this thing to do something like lift the rock or whatever, that sort of thing. So we did do a fun thing, and this is why, by the way, if you're a hacker, the Xbox Adaptive Controller, stay magnifique, because what we did was we hacked apart that headset. We connected it to an Xbox Adaptive Controller. We also took some muscle sensors that we placed on someone's cheeks. So thinking about someone who might have ALS, right, who has very little mobility, might not even be able to move any part of their body other than like their facial muscles. So we took 2 sensors. We hooked up that brainwave thing through the adaptive controller, and we actually were able to play Forza with it by twitching your cheeks left and right. You could steer, and then the harder you concentrated, the faster the car went. And it was funny because everyone had a different method. For me, I would do mental math. It'd be like 36 times 47, 30. That's how I would get the best results. Different people had different strategies. really hard to demo, especially in front of leadership, because then they would look at you and go like, oh dude, it's not working. It's like, yeah, because I've got my like vice president standing over me and I can't concentrate, like give me some space. But I say all that because like, I think those innovative technologies, right, I'm not expecting some major company to come out and create those technologies and provide them to us. I am a big believer in the maker community. I'm a big believer in that space. And so my suggestion is if you're passionate about that, there's great off-the-shelf EEG stuff you can buy. Some of it's a little more expensive, but you can still get those NeuroSky headsets for cheap on eBay. You can buy those kits. Grab one, play around with it, try hooking it up, use a device like the adaptive controller where it's really easy to create your own buttons. By the way, for the Xbox adaptive controller, I don't know, but if you take headphones and just cut them apart and you tap them together, you can make a plug, you can make a button. So you can create all sorts of really cool, easy sorts of interfaces using the adaptive controller as a platform. Go and try it yourself, and and maybe you'll be the person who brings it to the community, hopefully. And I'd love it. I want it now.
EEG is really interesting, and like everyone comes in here and asks me about BCI and stuff like that, and I'm like, oh yeah, you go under the knife first, man. I want to plug in my brain, but I think like what you're seeing out there in the world, there's this company, there's a bunch of them, but there's this one that I really like called Wisear. And they're making a pair of earbuds that do exactly what Brandon's talking about, where it reads your facial muscles, and you can get 6 inputs from just twitching, and plus there's an IMU in them, so they also do head direction. So it's really neat, right? Like they have this device, it's almost coming to market. It wouldn't surprise me. And you can find all kinds of wild stuff. I think what's interesting is that people they want the science fiction, but they don't think about the practical things. I think one of the really great devices that's coming out too is there's this company called Augmental, and they make this thing called the mouth pad. And what it is a trackpad for the top of your mouth, so that you use it with your tongue. And you basically because your tongue is like one of the last muscles to go. Like if you start to have and so they've taken this concept, and they basically make a custom mouth guard, and they put a trackpad in there, and it is wild. You see people fight with eye control and all this stuff, and it's like, no, get one of these. It's really cool. So there's other ways. I think it's hard to kind of make sure that they're all out there in the world, but I mean, EEG is super cool. We work with why am I blanking on their name? Limitless?
Limitless, but spelled limb, L-I-M-B.
Yeah, so, and they make prosthetic 3D printed arms for kids, and they make a game to train kids with their EEG, so they do it. They have a game in their arm that they hook up to Android phones. And they're out of the University of Orlando, or whatever that university is there. Yeah.
And we actually, Halo.
Oh yeah, cool.
We actually gave them models for Master Chief and Cortana so that they can make Master Chief arms and Cortana arms. It was so cool. It was one of my best projects I've worked on. By the way, I realized you said EEG. I was thinking of the neural, I was thinking of EKG, or not EKG, EEG, thank you. EMG, EEG. But the muscle sensors, the one thing I'll say about whether you're doing brainwave or not, they're just impacted by a lot of environmental factors. Humidity, sweat, body temperature, air temperature. We had a lot of different issues with those. So I feel like those technologies they've come a long way, especially more on the EMG, but we still have there's just a lot of space that still needs to be figured out to kind of reduce some of those problems. Plus just sticking stuff to you, because again, sensory processing, I hate having stuff stuck to me. So if we can get rid of the glue, that would be really great. The gummy stuff that you have to stick on and rip your hair off with.
You don't use wraparounds for that?
When we were doing it, when I was playing around with it, we found that those weren't, we had more problems with those than the ones that we stuck on your arm. Just because they didn't make as good contact, they would slip and move.
Because the universe doesn't let us cut a break on that.
The universe is not fair in so many ways. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I actually was wondering about the space. So this space is mostly dedicated to essentially essentially get forced into using accessibility features.
I mean, that's how the room started, like.
Okay. Like an experience lab kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, the room started because, like, I had a whole bunch of Xbox bros going, I don't understand why people can't use a controller. Like, this is literally I mean, their cognitive dissonance was very hard. Like, you would put someone down in front of a system. Like, it's really easy to, when you talk about the social model of disability, to this idea that, like, disability is designed because we don't include people's consideration in it. So we used to actually have like a controller set up in Xbox. Can you hold that for me? So we actually had a setup where I'd have buttons like 6 feet apart. Like I'd have buttons like 10 feet apart. And I'd go play this, and they're like, "This is fucking impossible." And I'm like, "Yeah," you know? Right?
Now you're getting it.
Yeah, exactly, right? Because of assumptions and not to, we all had 3 hands, like then what would game controllers look? I don't know.
You have the LED controller?
Yeah, oh yeah.
That's my favorite. That was the one that
That's
always
hilarious.
got the best reaction.
I forgot about that.
Yeah.
It's in here. So I'll take that. You can have that one.
Ooh, that's heavy.
Yeah, because I cracked open a controller and filled it full of shot.
Is that this?
Yeah. And so we'd hand people this controller and like, holy, and I'm like, yeah. Again. Yeah, it's funny, again, you forgot, I probably haven't pulled that out in like years.
And like those things are great, right? Because they like elicit things that people haven't thought about originally or before having that experience. But we also try to balance that with the fact that you can put blind goggles on somebody that's not going to give them a realistic take on what the lived experience of somebody who is actually blind is. And we don't want people to conflate those two things and think that they just get it because they wore these goggles for 5 minutes.
You don't get good data, but you do get some people get some perspectives that they didn't have.
For sure.
It's a great conversation starter, right?
Starter,
That with that controller, if I hand that to somebody and they grab it, I'm not trying to say you now know what it's like to have low muscle strength, right? But what I am saying is like, wow, that really surprised you, right? That it feels a little, it's uncomfortable, right? Like people like that's because we've built our non-buckshot filled controllers with standard human strength in mind, standard, average, and what we find out is there's lots of people out there that don't fit that average. In fact, what was the story about the airplanes when they were developing the military planes where they were building the seats and they took 100 different soldiers and they measured their arms and their heads and their distance, all this stuff about their bodies, and then they took the average and they built the plane seats, and then they found out that the planes were crashing like nonstop because no one pilot actually fit the average.
That's the story.
Yeah, right?
I mean, that was in World War II, it was 1,000. But yeah,
1,000,
I mean, so imagine a car where the seats don't adjust or the wheel doesn't adjust. And it's like, well, I designed this car for the average person. Like, you're going to get in it and it's not going to work for you. So that was the birth of ergonomics.
Yeah.
One of the births.
And that was the story I learned from Bryce, but it's also, that's why I love those things, because it kind of gives you that quick moment of shock that then lets you start to have the conversation, right?
Has there been a discussion about, and maybe this isn't within the scope of this lab, but discussion about the affordability of the accessible products that, as far as I know, run a little bit more than everything else?
Caitlin, you want to take that one, especially given the...
I have a shitty attitude about this.
But it's a realistic answer, but I'll follow up after you on the choice.
I mean, so with the adaptive controller, we tried to make it as inexpensive as possible. There's a lot of things you can't do because of that. I mean, the reality is we sell thousands of adaptive controllers versus millions of regular controllers, right? Like, it's just different scale. So with the adaptive accessories, what we did for like mouse and keyboard and all that, we actually had a problem in that we made them as inexpensive as possible, but you could only buy them through the Microsoft store, and you had to use a credit card, and that also limited how people got them, right? So what we actually to get more of those devices out into the world so that a company could buy them with a purchase order, or like a healthcare company could buy them with a purchase order, we actually had to raise the price of them. so that they could be sold at a reseller like a Best Buy or whatever. Because we didn't have any room in there to do that. So I do certainly appreciate, I mean, I really do, but I also like, it depends on who you talk to, right? Like there's so many people who come up to me, and they're behind Brandon, there's like an IntelliKeys, the weird keyboardy thing. But this is a weird example. This is like an old device that's been around forever, but it hasn't been made in forever, right? And you get people who get used to these like specific devices, whether it's this one or any other one. And then all of a sudden the company isn't viable, they go off the market, and people are like scrounging around eBay for the next 20 years.
Yeah.
So it's a weird balance for me, and I fully was like in the camp, like I think where a lot of people were, which is like, yes, there is an economic burden on the disabled community, absolutely, but I think about value a little bit differently now. And I mean, I'm not saying that like things should be expensive. I mean, you want to see something expensive, let's pull out. This is gonna hurt. Any guess? This is an eye control communication device for people who, you know, they would just use this if they're nonverbal. Any guesses on how much this costs?
Upwards of $5,000.
$5,000, good guess.
$22,000.
Better guess, but also high. It's about 15K. And yeah, crazy expensive. But, and I hated this for a long time, but like, here's the thing. What these guys can do that a consumer price product can't do, which is if someone who buys this needs support, they can call someone and that person will call them back right away, right? Like there is a support layer built in there that like you can't do in a consumer device.
Sure.
So a lot of these medical adjacent devices, when it comes to disability, there's certain expectations. Like Kaylin, I don't know if you've had this, I've had it. Like I did a session with like 100 pediatric clinicians with the adaptive controller. I'm like, this is awesome. When can I get my lunch and learn? Where's my customized like training number? Like where's like all this stuff that as medical professionals with medical ethics they expect? And I go, you don't have that. We sell this for $100.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, like if one of you guys emails a question about the adaptive controller, that comes to my personal inbox a lot of the time, and like, yeah, so Bryce's point is completely true. That being said, like we are very conscious of cost. We learned a lot from the community over the years on the front cost. So yeah, we launched this device in last month, March, May, 2 months ago. This is the Xbox Adaptive Joystick. We built it based on an ask from the disability community who were using the Xbox Adaptive Controller, but were having a hard time finding compatible and affordable joysticks that were able to be plugged into that. So that's why we created this. It retails for $29.99 US. So obviously it's, from a technology perspective, nowhere near as robust and complicated as the adaptive controller, which is why we were able to get it down to this price point. But yeah, we knew that was important, and we wanted to make sure that this didn't impose too much of an additional cost burden on players. So that $30 price point was really important to us.
And you made some interesting decisions. Like one of the things that I really love about it is that you don't have to plug it into an adaptive controller, right?
Yeah.
You can plug that straight into your Xbox.
Yeah.
And that's great because some people just need the joystick. They don't need, so why force somebody to buy, you know, something they don't need, right? Like that's another cost thing that I really thought was awesome about the work the hardware team did there.
Which is a great point. Like it's only a wired device, which kind of sucks to be honest. But at the end of the day, like we had to make trade-offs. So by not having a Bluetooth radio in there and by not having a battery, keeping it wired, that allowed us to not only bring down the cost but also save weight. We know that things can obviously be heavy, like the LED controller over a period of time for players with limited strength. So it's really when you're designing these things, it's trying to balance, you know, what is the ideal experience you can get to for the customer, knowing that you're never going to fully get it right.
But it's been hard. Like I've had people get very angry with me when the adaptive controller came out, which was mostly very positive, I think. But we did have a few people who were like, why is it more expensive than a standard controller, right? And that's hard because, you know, you have to explain things like cogs and, you know, all this stuff, right? I think at the end of the day, though, in general, I think the community understands that, you know, again, it comes back to building trust with the community and showing that you're really honestly trying to do the right thing by them. And when you do that, I think there's a lot of people understand, like these people have been buying these types of devices to control their computers and their wheelchairs and whatnot. So when they see a device like the adaptive controller for 99 bucks, the next closest device, I think, at the time was like 350 bucks and it didn't have half the functionality. Yep. They got it. You know, they understood like, wow, that's still a really cool thing. And we made sure it worked with, you know, now it works, you know, it works with Android, iOS, Mac OS, you know, Linux. Well, it works, you know, again, because we don't want people to have to buy different devices for different platforms. So I know that was a very long-winded question, but like cost is such a, because we know statistically, on average, people with disabilities have about 2/3 the disposable income of people who don't, right? So we know price is an important thing. And disability tax is real. Like it is just real.
It is a very weird and nuanced question because we do get a lot of people who ask us about, who want to do that price point, but they don't recognize that like no one's ever pressured me to make money on the adaptive controller.
Yeah,
sure.
Right? Like no one's ever said like we have to be, like the development of the device, we will never sell enough of them to cover the cost of the development. I don't want to say never. That's actually bad. I shouldn't say never. But like, you know, it'll be really hard. And no one's ever told us, oh, you know, we've never gotten that whole cost. No one's ever given us a P&E ratio on that, right? So.
Has there been an effort behind, or like with game studios, to share the technology of like developing these accessibility features and like sharing it between studios or even like open sourcing it?
Yeah, such a good question, and it's something that we are constantly thinking about. First off, as some of you might have heard, we acquired this little studio called Activision Blizzard King a while ago, and they had cool stuff they were doing, and we had cool stuff we were doing, and the thinking is like, well, how do we make it easy to share so that people aren't reinventing the wheel over and over? I think the best example of that, one area that we still haven't cracked yet, but we want to, is screen narration technology. Right now, on Xbox, every game is basically building in its own screen reader, and every game's doing it differently. And so there's a lack of consistency. People have to do the work over and over and over again. Wouldn't it be great if we just had one like plugin you could just drop into your game and it would just work, right? The problem is you've got different frameworks, UI frameworks, you've got different engines games are being developed in, all these different things, right? But with that being said, while it's a hard problem to solve, we are starting to see plugins and add-ins being developed in the community. There's some cool audio plugins that are being developed for Unity and Unreal that can help kind of, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel for some of these features and whatnot. And while we haven't done a ton in terms of sharing, just because a lot of our stuff is so, you know, we do have a lot of game engines like, you know, Halo Infinite is Slipstream engine, right, or Slipspace engine. That's a proprietary engine. It's built like, what we built there, we can't really share out code-wise with people because it just wouldn't work for y'all. But when we have games that are like in places like Unity or Unreal, there is a lot of conversation about like, is there ways we can take what we've built and find ways to share it out with the rest of the community? Because again, you know, and this is probably the coolest thing, the thing I love about Phil the most is that he said over and over again, this is not a point of competition for us, this is collaboration. So if we can make it easier for game developers to make their games more accessible, it doesn't matter if they're a competitor or not, that's great. And if you want to play on a Sony PlayStation, great. If you want to play on a Nintendo, great. We just want you to play. And so yes, we really want to do that. But again, there's just a lot of logistical challenges when it comes to packaging these things up so that they work for, you know, so that it can be dropped into a lot of different places. I mean, even just changes between Unreal, you know, the 4 and 5. Like you go from an engine, all of a sudden the plugin you wrote in 4 isn't going to work in 5, right? So then there's upkeep and whatnot. So there's interest, and I see stuff happening. I would just say that there's a lot of logistical stuff that has kind of hampered it, if that makes sense. Yeah. But hopefully someday I would love to just be able to go up to like Unity and there's a whole list of, here's all of the accessibility plugins, and you could just like start dropping them in, right? Like Minecraft mods or something. That would be so cool. Other questions? By the way, thank you for asking questions. Like this has been so nice because there are times where we do these talks and people just stare at us afterwards and it's like, oh my God. So it's really awesome to, you know, these are all, and they're all really good questions. So really appreciate that. Any others?
Yeah.
This one is, I don't know exactly how to phrase this, but it's more like an information. It's like a accessibility question on sort of like of cognitive disability. So a game like Skyrim has a lot of moving parts, a lot of different things to it. And you know, like if you, someone who's maybe not very familiar with the language of games and like what games expect from a player, how do the Xbox accessibility guidelines, maybe in the visual cue section, go over like how do you convey these systems to players while not reducing maybe the depth of the game itself?
God, that, and again, another really good question, because I'll back up for a second and say, how many of you are familiar with Get Good? Okay, so this was a big Elden Ring thing, right? People were like, Elden Ring's not gonna put in any difficulty levels. It's just gonna be nightmare mode for everybody. And people with disabilities, as well as just people who are more casual gamers, like, well, I wanna play, I wanna experience the story. And then people were like, no, difficulty will water down the game and blah, 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 right? It was really frustrating. It was really sad to see. Because the point of accessibility is not to water down things. And, you know, I think there's a misconception we get sometimes that accessibility does water down or it's easy mode, right? We want people to have a challenge. Like, we want you to feel, you know, we want you to have the challenge you want to have. So if you want that nightmare difficulty, we want to give it to you. If you want to have that, hey, I just want to get the story for the most part, we want to give that to you too. From an artist's perspective, my view on it is like, how many people do you want to see your art? Like, you probably want as many people as possible. I mean, as an artist, I think I want as many people to experience what I've created as possible. So I want to give them options. But, you know, so with that being said, I would say, you know, as you're thinking about the Xbox accessibility guidelines or making your games more accessible, you know, try to keep in mind that accessibility does not inherently water things down. People have that mistake, but people do come up with concerns every now and then that are like, you know, you have to sit down and think about it. I think a really great example of that was the Fortnite sound visualizer. Have any of you seen that? Mm-hmm. So basically what it does is when you're playing Fortnite, it puts sounds where sounds are coming from around you. You can turn it on and it'll visualize them, right? And that's cool because in you know, you can hear, you know, you rely a lot on hearing someone creeping up behind you or the sound of a chest make for those of you who don't play Fortnite, chest make a sound. And so for people who are deaf or hard of hearing, very hard to hear those. So this sound visualized wheel was great, but there was questions like, is this gonna cost people, is this a cheating mechanism? Does this make the game easier, right? And so the team at Coalition who worked on Gears did a really cool presentation once about how they thought about it. And unfortunately, it's not something we were ever able to share publicly. But the theory they used, I think I can share, and it's a good one, which is when you're thinking about the accessibility of your experience and adding in features, and you're starting to worry about, you know, either watering down or competitiveness, right? Think of it this way. What are the core mechanics of your game? Is a core mechanic of your game listening for footsteps? If it isn't, Fortnite, like, that's not really the point of the game. The game's not about listening for footsteps, right? It's a part of the game, but it's not a core mechanic. But it is something that's beneficial. You know, probably not something you need to worry about, right? Like if you're adding that visualization or thing. If your game is literally a game where the whole point is for you to try to listen very carefully for sounds around you, then maybe you do need to think a little more carefully about how you apply accessibility features that might affect that experience, right? But again, as long, you know, just keep in mind, like, think about what are your core mechanics? Is the features you're doing, are they going to impact negatively those core mechanics? And if you feel like they are, then you make the decision to either give people the choice to turn them on and off, or, and again, I tell game developers this, I will never tell you what to do as a game developer. If you want to make your game, if you have a vision for your game and you do not want to put in accessibility features, that's your choice. Like, no one is telling you you have to do this stuff. But keep in mind that what the impact is going to be in terms of the people who are going to be able to experience your art, and just think about, you know, keep that in mind as you're, you know, and then think about, you know, are there ways you can kind of work around it to kind of strike that balance between your vision and, you know, and making something accessible. I mean, a really good example of this was when I was working on Halo 5. I was working with an audio designer, and we were talking about how he had spent literally like 100+ hours trying to build the perfect audio mix for Halo, right? Like the perfect audio mix. And then I mentioned to him that I have asymmetrical hearing loss. And he was like, oh. The point is like, I don't want him to now say he has to create a mix just for me. Because here's the thing, if he creates the mix just for me, it's not gonna work for someone else, right? Like, I want him to create his grand vision of his audio scene, but just give me some abilities afterwards to tweak it to my needs, right? Like, give me the ability to turn off the background noises. Like, I don't need to hear the waterfall. That's just distraction for me. I don't need to hear, but I really do need to hear the gunshots, because I need to know if someone's shooting at me, right? You know, give me opportunities to customize. So I'm sorry, that was a little bit of a rambling answer, but it's something that it's something that kind of touches me personally, because it has been probably, there are two arguments against accessibility that I continue to hear and I've heard since I started this. One is cost, like, oh, we're gonna build this feature, it's gonna eat up a ton of resources, and we only think like 100 people are going to use it. And then the other one is, oh, it waters the game down. It makes the game not good. And so again, on the side of thinking about mechanics and that, I think that's the way to address that. On the money side and that sort of thing, I think the thing you have to realize too, if anybody does ever come at you that way, is just to remember that, again, these features are used by more than just the disability community. And also, when you make accessible products, those people are going to want to play those accessible products with other people who are then going to probably go out and purchase your game, especially if you're playing a multiplayer game online. They're going to want to buy those games. It's going to serve more than just the individual who uses that feature. It's going to help broaden your product. So those are the two that I get constantly, and I honestly still get a little. It still kind of gets me a little sore when I hear those questions, and that's why I'm getting a little more rambly. It's that we should just do it for the right reason, right? Which is like, again, we don't want anyone to feel excluded. Can't that just be enough, right? But again, we live in a world of capitalism, and we got to sell products and to make money, and we got to pay salaries. So that's why people ask these questions and whatnot, and that's why we have to have these. You know, we have to be able to explain accessibility in these ways sometimes. People. So sorry, I hope that answered your question. Okay. Yeah, that one touches a little bit of a nerve with me, just because of I've been asked that so many times. Not that your question, but you know, people have asked me why. You know, I literally had an executive at a company once tell me that if I couldn't, he's like, well, if I can't show that this feature is going to sell another 80,000 units, there's no point in putting it in. I was just like, ugh. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
This is less so an accessibility or disability problem and more an linguistical one. I come from Kenya, and English was a second language for me, and I wasn't particularly fluent until much later in my teens. And one problem that arose initially when I got into games, especially with the Xbox 360, was my inability to read English fluently. Now that is no longer a problem, but later I was able to get an iPhone, and they have an inbuilt feature where you can look up the definition of a word just inbuilt into the iPhone on any application. Yeah. And it is a feature that I have hoped would be applied on many other platforms. Has it ever been considered for Xbox?
You know, it's so funny you mention that, because I think right now with what's going on with AI, that sort of thing is like it seems like so easy now to do, because in the past you would have had to hard code all that, right? Like I'd have to go in, I'd have to build a glossary, I'd have to link it in my UI, I'd have to give you an option to be able to go in and choose the thing, right? It would be a lot of UI work. Now though, that we have systems that can do image recognition and can look at a screen, can find text on a screen, can identify the text, at that point, there's no reason that we can't then just have it go through, do a translation, or give an explanation using an LLM, right, and spit that out, right? So the good news is I'd say that I think with some of these new technologies you're hearing about in AI around like gaming co-pilots and things like that, systems that are going to be there to help you as you're playing games, you're going to see features like that would have been hard to do. From a design perspective, from a cost resourcing perspective, they're going to make some of that a lot easier, right? I think that feature is going to be a lot easier to implement with like an LLM and an AI system like that. And so that's one of the reasons I'm really stoked about AI, is I think AI is going to give us the ability to create more accessible products or more accessibility features than in more cost-efficient ways and more effective ways. One thing I will say though, I love that you brought up language, because It's another example of broadening, right? If you have very large blocks of text that are very, that use a bunch of big words and stuff, like it can be very cognitive overloading, right? It might be hard for someone who speaks, that language is a second language and whatnot. So, when we talk about ways to simplify, breaking up text, having alternative ways of conveying information, that helps more than just people who are neurodiverse. It can help people who have, who speak a second language and are maybe struggling, because again, like, may I ask what exact language you learned growing up? Swahili, right? So not a lot of games are localized in Swahili, I would imagine, right? I don't think, I used to do localization for 343, and I don't think we did Swahili for Halo. So yeah, it's cool to think about that some of these features can help people who speak other languages that the games aren't localized into and are trying to play it in another language like English. Yeah, so really good question. And yeah, I do think I think you'll see with the AI coming about, you're gonna see features that are gonna be able to do exactly what you're talking about.
Speaking about AI, would C# be a good one to learn how to do with working the AI with the game because it works with the .NET?
That's a really, first off, I'm not a game developer. I play one on TV. I don't program. I program the first programming language, and the one I'm still best at is VBA for Office. So I can write these killer macros. But what I will say is that I think it's less important to know like C# or C++ or Python, or that is, I'm finding, is less, because there's so many different models out there and ways to connect to those models that, whatever language I think you're programming, you're going to probably find a system that you can use, an API. Worst case scenario, you use a REST API to connect to a web service or something like that. What I would say is more important is really starting to learn, kind of the underlying, like how these AI models are working and how to train them properly to make sure that when you're using them in your games, they're providing the best answers and they're not hallucinating, right? And also from an accessibility standpoint, I did give a talk at GDC this year on making sure that there's different accessibility considerations you have to think about when you're building with AI. Because in the past, we only thought about front ends with accessibility. We didn't really care about what's going on in the back end. But now, if that AI starts saying things like using language that is offensive to people with disabilities, or is telling people who might say, oh, I'm having a bad day, and it says, oh, I've got a remedy, and it tells you something about self-harm, as a, we literally had that happen, and there was an AI that did that. These are things we have to think about. So I'm learning more about the model training and that sort of thing and focusing on that, and then also thinking about what is the content that's going to be spit out and how is that going to be impactful to people with disabilities, especially when you think about people with trauma, people who are neurodiverse. Also, AI giving recommendations for we've had AI give suggestions for medical treatment. It's like, that's not our job. That's not what, we are doing in our experience. So scoping, that sort of thing. That's where I would probably be focusing most of my attention.
And is there any personality parameters that you guys try to work with AI so it avoids those things like you're speaking about?
So prompt engineering is really tricky with this because obviously the larger, your first gut reaction is, okay, I'm going to feed in a list of words I never wanted to say, right? Well, that makes your prompt longer, you get a little more tokens, it becomes more expensive performance, yada, yada, yada. So what I would say is we are trying to think of ways that we can build models rather than with those learnings built in so that we don't have to send extra prompts along that take a lot of time and tokens and resources. But yeah, we could probably talk about this for 3 hours. My suggestion would be if you have access, I believe the GDC advocacy talks are all free. So my talk is up there. You should be able to access it even if you didn't go to GDC. Please take a look at it and it'll talk about some of that stuff. And then, would love to have a conversation. We can set up a meeting. I'd love to chat about it. It's something that I'm really passionate about, and I feel like it's just one of those nascent areas that is going to be so cool, and we can have so much impact if we tackle this early on. Absolutely. So yeah, we'd love to chat with you about it. Yeah, it's such a cool thing. Yeah. Yeah, no, of course. Yeah.
So going back to the comment made before about we're all gonna get old.
Yeah. Once we die,
you ever had just a session where you
Thanks, Bryce. What a downer. Sorry.
You ever had just a session from like a senior center, just come in here and test all this stuff out?
Bryce, have we ever had a senior center? I don't know.
You know, seniors is a really weird thing, right? Because I do get a lot of people who bring that up, and I must admit, I mean, it's absolutely true. You know, people with disabilities, as we get older, we all acquire disabilities. 100% true. I don't know if personally, and this is again, completely me, not like everyone else. Like, I don't think seniors are that different. Someone asked me this question, and like kind of recently in India. So just to give you some context, like colleagues in India, I was in India, they were like, what about seniors? And I was like, seniors are just disabled people in denial.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like, I kind of mean it in a weird way, but it talks about stigma, right? Like, because there are, like, they have acquired disabilities because of age, but if they're not getting their needs met, it's because of stigma. It's like, I'm not disabled, I don't need this. Like, you know, so it's a weird thing, right? Like, I genuinely do believe that, but it is a strange way, I think, to go about it. Lots of people do. There are obviously lots of things in aging. I mean, what's interesting about aging is the interrelated needs of different disabilities. You have cognitive, vision, hearing. Like, all of a sudden, you know, as you get older, you're getting everything.
I had
right?
them young.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, but, you know, but the intersectionality you bring up is a really great point, right? Because it's one thing to bring in somebody who's deaf and say, you're going to talk about your experience. And then you bring in somebody who has like hemiplegic cerebral palsy, and we're going to talk about fine motor. But as you get older, we do see more intersectionality between disabilities, right? Because again, like, you know, multiple parts of our bodies start to kind of stop working as well, right? So I do think it's a really cool thing to bring in people with disabilities that intersect one another, right? Because a solution that works for someone who's deaf might not work for someone who's deaf and also has sensory processing disorder, right? And so thinking about that, right? It's probably the hardest area, I think, for us to challenge, especially when we think about neurodiversity, is that intersectionality. So I do think it's a cool idea to bring in. And as we get older, you know, every year the average age of gamers is going up because, you know, people my age, like who, you know, I'm 46, like I was playing games. My dad wasn't when he was a kid, but when I was born, I was playing on my Pong system, right? So I'm going to be playing video games. You know, a lot of the people you go into now, to old folks' homes now, probably haven't played video games much. You're going to find a lot of people that probably haven't. But, you know, give that 20 years, or give that even 10 years, and I think you're going to see a much different, you're going to see a lot more people who have that experience. And so in that scenario, then I think it's going to be easier to bring in people who are knowledgeable from those communities and, again, learn from them. So it's a great thing. I think it's something I'd love to do, but right now it sounds like we haven't had that. And
I will say, sorry.
Oh, no, please, sorry.
So I work a lot with the veteran community. I've done adaptive setups for veterans upwards of 60, 65 years old. Definitely still gamers, especially when you think about the connection between family members. As an adult, as a grandpa, as a whoever, I want to play with my grandkids. They do want to play, they want to game. So that's certainly a thing. I think the other thing to keep in mind too is how you define what a gamer is. Yeah. I also work a lot with the therapy community, and just statistically, they don't always tend to be gamers. So I'll like go to a conference and do a talk on adaptive gaming and be like, how many of you are gamers? No one will raise their hand, and then I'll say, how many of you play Candy Crush? And everyone will raise their hand. So it really depends on how you define what gaming really is. My grandma, I said this before, she literally plays Candy Crush for like 12 hours a day. Like, that is her core hobby. She, by that definition, she is a harder core gamer than probably all of us in this room. So, like, you know, expand your thoughts on what a true gamer is and how people define gaming and how they actually spend their time. And I think we might all be surprised on like how many people of older demographics are actually enjoying games. And I think that's going to grow.
That's a really good point, because my dad's 82, and the college kids in his neighborhood, I was at his house, and they knocked on his door while I was there, and they're like, oh, hey, can Jim come out and raid with us? Because my dad has 2 level 50 Pokemon accounts and a level 46, and he goes out and he's got the board with the phones on him. It's the only game he plays, Pokemon Go, but he started playing it because my kids wanted to play with him. So yeah, it's a really good point. No one would ever call my dad a gamer, but he plays a lot of Pokemon Go, so that's a really, really good point. Anything else? Any other questions?
Also, if anyone does need to head out, you won't hurt.
Yeah, we will not be offended. I know this has gone a little. Look, one of the best parts of our jobs is meeting with people like you and sharing this. Obviously, you can tell we're a little passionate and we get a little emotional sometimes because it's just something we care about so much. So literally, the best part of our job is just this sort of thing. So the fact that you all came out tonight really made our day, made our week, made our month. Please contact us. We'd love to chat with you. We want to learn what you're doing. We want to help out if we can, and we'd love to take your great things and help promote them and help share them out. Reach out to us. Again, the easiest way probably to reach us is xaccess@microsoft.com. That comes to Caitlin and me directly. We can connect you with Bryce if you need to, but like reach out to us. We want to talk to you, and just thank you so much for coming out. We really had a blast.
Thank you.
All right, thanks everyone.
This filled up within 20 hours in person, or less than 20 hours. Like, it filled so fast. And even just like when we announced it in the newsletter, I had like this encore of all these people asking if they could come, and it was like just trying to get people in because we had so many people want to be here and be a part of this.
That is really the coolest thing, and again, just thank you all for being advocates. Thank you for even wanting to bring this up, because it's something that the more of us that are out there advocating and showing interest and passion, the easier it's going to be for us to build cool, accessible products for our community. So really appreciate your interest. All right, everyone get home safe, and I'll stick around for a while. I don't know if Bryce, do we have a few minutes if people want to come up and ask one-on-one questions? No rush. So yeah, come talk to me, Caitlin. But yeah, thanks again.
I'm gonna reset the light so it's getting a little dark. So
oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Maggie, hi. Oh wow, zebras.
You zebra?
I'm not a zebra, but one of my good friends is.
Oh,
Yeah, I know some people that still work there.
just on my experiences with game affecting disabilities. I finally got it online, so send to you.
Yes, please. I would love to watch it. Yeah, and then that way too, we can link it as an accessibility resource if you're okay with that on our page, so we can point people to that. Elder Stanless is one that is still, I find that people understand deaf, blind, and they're starting to understand. Elder Stanless is one that is still a lot of people are talking never heard of, and it has a very interesting impact. Obviously, you know firsthand the impacts it can have, and how, and yes, I think it would be wonderful. So please send me a link, and I'd love to, and also I'd love to just talk to you more as go through the guidelines. If you feel like there's things that we're missing that specifically would be beneficial to you, let me know. I'd love to get updates in there that would help people with, hypermobility and other things related to, similar to colors.
I was also wondering,
So is there a thing?
I'm actually in Seattle.
You would think they were here. Not necessarily.
Yeah.
What's the way to get
We have a link on our site, which is an article that I wrote that I did 3D printing, and I have links to all these
I'm thinking of 1.5 Unreal games on the original Xbox. I worked on Hogwarts Legacy. I shipped 7 Unreal games on consoles. But it's not Unreal 5, so like I had a interview with them and because I did apply for one job. That job had already sold out, and I know you should apply for this one. It was like a lead job. I haven't been a lead.
I'm learning. I'm trying. It's a struggle. You I have no idea what this thing is.
is a difficult problem line.
I've had so many people want to come.
I'm trying to.
So limitless at UCF. I have a
But like again, just how to
and she's also here for her husband works at
Because half the people who do that, like, end up engaged.
Yet she's been, she wants to do industrial design. She's always found that every
we all say the struggling game development, been there, done that, man. I get it.
I use that term a lot too, so, legend.
Yeah. She's always been like, a lot of great master too.
The great thing about the accessibility is that
It's so nice.